Melissa here. So today I wanted to talk about my route to diagnosis with Meniere's disease. How did I get there? What was going on? So I guess the first thing I noticed was I started having dizziness and vertigo, and for like no kind of known reason, started having some ear fullness and like ringing in my ears, tinnitus, as some people call it. I didn't really, I guess, think about them all being connected until I had a family member that was told that that's what she had, Meniere's disease. And so I Googled and WebMD'd, you know, the things we're not supposed to do. Don't do it. It's a slippery slope, but I did it and realized that I had all of those symptoms: the dizziness, the vertigo, the ear fullness, the ringing in my ears. All of that stuff is pretty common, like first things you notice when you're starting to notice that something's going on. Well, she went to an ENT, so maybe I should do that too. And I had an ENT that I really liked. I used to work in the medical community, and so I used to work in surgery, so I knew a lot of the doctors and the surgeons around town. And I worked with this ENT with one of my kids as well. So I scheduled an appointment, went in, told them kind of what I was coming in for, and they were like, okay. So I went in and they tested my hearing right away. And it was fairly normal at the time. The first time I went in, I had some, a little bit of like the hint of a start of a deficiency in the low level frequencies, which is pretty common. But everything above that I could hear. So I did that test and then went in, talked to the doctor, and he reviewed my hearing test and like all my symptoms and said, yeah, pretty much sounds like Meniere's. You know, he explained to me that there's not a ton that can be done about it, but he said a pretty common trigger is like high sodium, and so which causes us to retain fluid. So what is Meniere's? Well, Meniere's is a disease that basically it's in the vestibular system in your inner ear stuff. Essentially, your inner ear tubes are a little too narrow, and you have lots of fluid that builds up in your body, and those tubes get full of fluid, and that causes the dizziness and the vertigo. And it can also damage the cilia, the little hairs in your ear that wiggle when sound vibrates them. That's how we hear things. So it can damage those, which leads to permanent hearing loss. That is unfortunately something that comes along with Meniere's. Not everybody experiences that, and it can take years and years. I mean, it can be like 20 plus years before that part kind of becomes into play, before someone loses all of their hearing and becomes deaf. That can be quite the journey, so it's different for everyone. There's no, I mean, it can happen overnight or it can happen 20, 40 years. So I know people that have had both experiences with that. So he was just explaining all of this to me, and then he decided to put me on a medication called Triamptor HCl. Basically, it's a diuretic, it's a water pill. It helps your body eliminate fluids quicker and more efficiently. So that helps keep the inner ear system cleared out. I started that, and he recommended a low sodium diet, which is pretty common. We'll get into whether that helps or not in another video, but that is always recommended for people with Meniere's, to start a low sodium diet and see if that will help reduce fluid retention, which can reduce symptoms. He recommended all of that and wanted to see me in every couple of months. So I went back every few months, having my hearing tested each time, and just kind of like, how are things going? Is anything better or worse? He really didn't want me to stay on the water pill. He wanted me to try to wean myself off of it as soon as possible. And each time we went back, there was a little bit of a decline in my hearing, but nothing super significant. After a few visits, my family actually started traveling and we left town. I called and he said that's fine as long as your symptoms are kind of stable. And I told him I had actually tried to wean myself off the water pill like he had asked me to, and my symptoms came back really, like, severely. I noticed them, and it might have just been because they were gone for a while or less for a while, and they came back like with a vengeance when I tried to go off of the water pill. So he said just keep taking it and come back if your symptoms get worse. I said okay. So my family went and traveled for a while, so I was good for about 2 years, just pushing fluids, which I know sounds backwards, but it helps your body flush. Taking the triameter and watching my sodium intake. And then just recently, probably the last like 4 months or so, the symptoms have come back and they are getting much worse, even with still doing all the same things. So it's time to go back to the ENT. So I made an appointment and I'm actually going there next week. So I will go back, have another hearing test, and just talk to him. My symptoms are a lot worse. I've had some new, like, increasing symptoms, some new symptoms. With my hearing, it seems to be getting worse. Now I'm having trouble hearing, like, in crowds, and definitely some low-level deficits. So we'll see how that hearing test comes out. There are some people, when they're getting diagnosed, the doctors will ask to have you have like an MRI, a CT, blood work, stuff like that. Basically because they want to rule out other things, right? They want to rule out like a tumor or any kind of abnormality in your structures, just any kind of brain issue. They want to, like, you know, make sure that everything's okay in there. And then if all of that pretty much comes back negative, then you're left with Meniere's, right? It's kind of a rule out, and this is what's left. So there's another thing that a lot of people have with Meniere's. It's called vestibular migraines, and I do not have this, but from what I've heard from people, it's horrible. It is kind of similar, right? Only you get the migraines with it, and you get the light sensitivity, all things that come with migraines. But it's caused because of the fluid buildup, and it's just sort of a positional thing, I think, where the fluid is just in the right place to cause migraines. I do not have that, thank goodness, but a lot of people do. With just the talking with people that I know that have it, a lot of them have this as well. So that might be something to watch out for. I think the people that have vestibular migraines see a neurologist for that, and they can help with medications and things to help with that. So there's, like I said, no known cause, and there's no cure. They basically just treat the symptoms. So a lot of people end up on some sort of diuretic pill, and a lot of people end up on like meclizine or Valium to treat the vertigo and the dizziness. And I've seen other people on different medications. I don't take it. I just take the water pill for now. I don't know if I would take the other stuff, just because I know that it has lots of side effects, and I'm kind of anti-medication as much as I can be. But that is sort of my experience with getting diagnosed. Mine was pretty easy. Luckily, I had an ENT that was very knowledgeable and very open and willing to go there. I know some ENTs sort of don't know a lot about it, and so they will tell you that nothing's wrong with you or whatever. But I would recommend, if you find someone, if you have all the symptoms and you feel like it's really what you have, and your ENT is being kind of a stickler about it, I would recommend finding another ENT, maybe one that specializes in Meniere's, and going to that person so that you can get the help you need, so you don't have to struggle with a doctor that isn't being helpful. Anyways, I hope some of this information is helpful. It can let you know sort of what my process was and what I've heard from others. If you're in the process of getting diagnosed, or you think this might be what you have, you can definitely reach out in the comments and give me if you have questions, you can pop them down there. Or if you have your experience and you'd like to share, definitely pop those down in the comments too, and share with everybody so that we can hear different experiences. Like I said, mine was reasonably painless and pretty easy, but I've heard some kind of horror stories. So hopefully, hopefully your experience was a good one. And if you're still trying to get diagnosed, keep your chin up. It's okay. This is not a fun disease to live with, but it's possible to live a full life with it. Thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to talking to you. Sending lots of love to all my warriors out there dealing with invisible illness. I know it can be really tricky and tough, but keep smiling. Talk to you soon. Bye.